right, ladies and gentlemen, let's do this. Let's do this. Here we are live. Welcome to it for episode number 18 of the Convergence podcast. I'm welcoming my friend Ro here. What's going on, Ro? Hold on, let me unmute you. Holy shit, I can't believe I did that. Let me do this. I have to mute it. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing.
So many buttons.
So many buttons.
So little
Welcome
time.
to it, brother. How you been?
What's up, Bravo? Pretty good. Pretty
That-
good. Pretty good. I
Pretty
mean, as good as one can be.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, are you at least enjoying 2025 so far?
I am one of those guys that no matter what is happening, I'm glass half full. So yes.
Very nice. Very nice, as usual. Let me see if I could get over. I'm trying to YouTube. Come on, YouTube. Trying to get YouTube up. I'm having some sort of difficulties, because I'm old, so there's that.
Comes with the territory,
It
right? So
does.
many buttons.
So many
But
buttons. All
yeah,
right.
we look good on YouTube there. I got that second screen going.
Yes, we do. Got the background. Okay. Well, for those who have not heard the podcast before, basically the idea behind this live setup and doing it on the video is to basically have this live interaction, but it's going to be the audio is going to be cut down into not edited but formatted into a podcast format. Nice little cleaned up, everybody's levels and stuff at the beginning of the end and blah blah blah. And this is what will become the podcast. And so it's a little loose in the beginning, got some introductions, whatever have you, and then ultimately we pretend like the intro is just ended and then we get into it, which is pretty much what we just already have. So I'm going to leave all of this in and just have it be what it is. But this is the Convergence. And for those who are not, again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited. Um, it is I like to call it the crossroads of escapism and reality. We take people. I like to talk with people who are creators among themselves, both on streaming platforms that out in the industry, as well as friends who are just fans. And I like to talk to them about the ins and outs of not only being a fan and a creator, but what the industry has done to us as fans, and how the changes have affected both the creation of it and how we appreciate it. So that's ultimately, some politics dropped in because you can't help that nowadays, but ultimately everything is so intertwined, it's hard to separate that. And I like to have people like my friend Ro here on to sort of level me out and tell me about Star Wars and all the cool stuff that's been going on Disney Plus for the last 2 years. Go. You have
That's deep. That's deep, Bravo. That
two
is
years.
deep. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, it's been, I've been podcasting for a couple of years. I think Brad and I started in 2019 after Star Wars Celebration here in Chicago. And it's been quite a ride. I think one of the reasons that we really enjoy or still enjoy podcasting is just interacting with people, that are out here in the on all the socials, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the whatevers, and it's just been a lot of fun. I mean, interacting with people that may or may not have the same opinion as us, especially when it comes to movies and entertainment. But I think we kind of still harken back to the days of during lunchtime out in recess or whatever, just talking about the latest, geeky movies or TV shows or whatever. And we've never grown up, and I think that is kind of the go-to when it comes to why it is that we do what we do, especially as content creators. But I think, truth be told, it's also a little bit of therapy. It's a way to unwind. It's a way to kind of um, put your brain in a state of just relaxing and talking about the stuff that I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it is kind of like mindless fun, talking to other fans of whatever it is that you're a fan of, and it's enjoyable. But I do feel like it is a big part of it is, therapy, and we like to go down memory lane and experience the stuff that we loved when we were kids. We're still kids. It's just that we're older, but I
Yes.
think, I think that's the biggest part of it for me.
Yeah, what I appreciate about the community, the organicness of what started off on Twitter and then gravitates towards YouTube and then podcasting and those sorts of things. Uh, what I enjoy about the community in and of itself is its desire to produce, knowing that there's very little eyeballs watching. You're doing it
Right.
simply for the love of doing it and hanging out with friends and talking around a campfire about, the last show you watched or what that book meant to you, or whatever it is. um the volume has only increased in
Sure.
creators and how often they're creating, but the number of creators and the different platforms and those sorts of things. Do you see yourself um eventually moving on to bigger production type of projects beyond just the podcast?
No, and obviously, I don't know what the percentage is of content creators that get rich and famous, but I'm not looking for that. I've got a career, I've got a job, I've got a family. To quote that very infamous meme, ain't nobody got time for that. It's I just enjoy doing what I do now. If I get 200 listens on a show or 20 listens on a show, like you said, I think it's just about the idea of just kind of spilling your guts and saying, I like this, I don't like this, what do you think, what do I think, let's compare notes and just have fun. I because I'm in video production and broadcast and media. If you tell me to go and do a video for YouTube, as a scare YouTube, like a lot of these other guys and gals are doing, I think it would be too much work, because I'm a perfectionist when it comes to media. And I think if I were to do like a 1 hour video or something, it has to be like perfect. And I think at that point I would start to feel like it's actual work,
Mm,
and I probably won't enjoy it as much.
interesting.
Because like I said, I feel like, I've got all the latest cameras and all the editing techniques. I've been editing since I was, I don't know, 10 years old. So I want it to be as perfect as it can. But then at that point, it's like, am I doing it for the right, reasons, at that point?
Right.
And I think I would probably cross into the no, answer, because I just want to have fun and talk to folks like we're doing now, and like we do on the podcast, and just interact with people on socials. So I'm enjoying it. It's not a perfect science, but I think it's an avenue for us to kind of unwind.
Yeah. Do you have no aspirations to write a book or like branch out in any sort of way? Like, has the creativity from what you do with Scarif as well as SPI, does it branch off? Do you feel like you want to be doing not something else, but something in addition to what you're doing that you've always wanted to do, and maybe now that with the expertise and the fan base, you kind of have something baked in there?
A little, yeah. So I think a little bit of that, because you know, I so I work in media. I run my own video production company. I've got clients. So it's one of those things where, the collective experience of not only doing those things, but also running a podcast with Brad, my co-host, and then also, helping to run a podcast network. I think all of those things kind of encompass, um not encompass, but also kind of scratch that itch of just continuing to be creative on all aspects of
Hmm.
what I do. Todd, over at WSTR, always mentions the fact that he sees me as like a plate spinner. I'm like spinning plates all over the place, and I think I do see myself kind of doing that. I try to be as accommodating as I can to other podcast creators. I love helping and assisting and offering, I guess, my experience, my expertise, and I think that's another aspect of where I get um, joy from. So as far as yeah, I mean, as far as creativity, I think it's always kind of been in my blood to be able to create stuff. In college, I had a summer job for a couple of years as a banker, and oh my god, I could not stand that.
No.
It was oh man, that was rough, bro. That was rough.
two
Yeah,
two 9 to 5.
yep, yeah.
So for folks who don't know, what is your 9 to 5 usually?
I work in well, I'm the trifecta of I guess I'm the trifecta of what do you call it? Losing my train of thought here, but I'm Mexican. I work in media, and I'm a liberal. So so go figure. That my 9 to 5 is I work television news here in Chicago,
In
and
Chicago, yes.
I shoot news, I edit, we go live, whenever need be. But and then I, run a video production company on my days off. So I'm really never off, but I have been blessed really to really enjoy what I do, both professionally and off the clock. I was telling you just earlier before we went live, my days off are 2 days during the week, and when
Hmm.
I am not working, I try to schedule actual production shoots, with the company. So I'm always behind a camera, I'm always editing, I'm always behind a keyboard somewhere. And I think, like I said, I've been lucky and blessed that I enjoy what I do.
What what do you like most about the aspect of Twitter, the change in Twitter over the last 2+ years now, in its relation to what we do, what you do, what you've been doing longer than me, but for years? Has it changed? Has the way that you um, interact with Twitter X, has that changed since
Yeah,
Elon?
it's changed. It's gotten worse. It's changed a lot. I think the pandemic. I think a lot of people were on social media because they had nothing else to do. I think it was a work from home situation when that happened. So I think we lived through the height of the interaction on social media because of that. As COVID started to go away, um, you know, people went back to work. The political climate has changed as well. So people are either not interested in interacting with people because of I want to say, the argumentative nature of social media.
Mm.
But it has changed a lot. I just posted just a couple of minutes ago that somebody was talking about the change in their interaction with people on Twitter, um, and I kind of chimed in. I said, "Yeah, it's been like tumbleweeds the last couple of I would say, like, the last year and a half, especially definitely since Elon bought the platform." Um, I'm not a political kind of guy, and I hate seeing all that stuff on both sides of the hall, if you know what I mean. I'm just on social media to talk to other nerds about geek stuff, and I think that's where I live. That's where I kind of exist in that little sweet spot. But it has changed. I think it's for me, and I feel like for a lot of people it has changed for it's gotten worse. The interaction has leveled off, even among the Red 5 network people. Less posts, less content. I think people are back to living lives and touching grass, if you know what I mean.
I see. Do you, as far as far as the interactions go, do you think that there's an algorithm change to because there's been this huge push on X from Elon to be the number one news site, but news in what fashion? And it seems that it's news in the traditional sense is talking about like one side of the house instead of entertainment, sports, going down that, focusing on all the big three instead of just politics and stuff. And I understand politics changes, or the news changes every day. But do you think that his overemphasis, or do you think he's overcorrected perhaps because he's a gamer himself? I mean, he's a nerd himself. Self-ascribed autistic, and he's nerdy as all get out. So is it just that that's not how he uses X, and you think that, or do you think perhaps that the emphasis has been shifted more towards sort of guiding politics and talking in that fashion rather than what we've been doing for the last several years?
Absolutely. I think it's pretty obvious, and if people can't see that, they should have their eyes checked because I mean, it definitely has shifted. I think everybody's got a goal, everybody's got an agenda. I think he is no different. He's up in the White House with the president,
Mm-hmm.
and mission accomplished, as they say. So it's something that that is unfortunate from an entertainment standpoint because like I said, when we first started, none of this really heavy political stuff was happening on Twitter until he stepped in and used the tool for his purposes. um and it's you can definitely tell. I mean, obviously there was a big exodus of people that were already on Twitter, that were using Twitter to communicate, to decimate news, or just interact with other aspects of fandom. um those folks are no longer, like I said, there was an exodus of people leaving Twitter, going to other platforms, or just giving up social media altogether, and we're kind of left with the crumbs. We're left with the scragglers, who are here for whatever reason. But yeah, I feel like it's definitely changed, and for me it's changed for the worse.
Yeah, um there's there are some things that I've noticed as far as just overall impressions, and I think the engagements, I guess, is a better way to say it across the board. The it's the engagements in and of themselves, as far as growth goes, it's non-existent on Twitch and YouTube. There was one of these things, and then bam, and then the it's trickling upwards, but it's nowhere near where it had been 20 2020 2021, those sorts of things when I had jumped in here. But the one thing that I was talking with my buddy Chris offline, the one thing that we're noticing is the what people used to describe as censorship and those sorts of things. There was a mediation of sorts that has since disappeared. And with that, I think the discourse has become more abrasive because it can be. And no, less people are afraid of offending somebody, or any number of things. And you've seen the uptick in, I mean, I've done it too, the uptick in words that people typically don't use in polite conversation. The the abrasiveness going across the fence on one side or the other, just based off of first glances. It there is a, and I don't think that a lot of people sort of see it this way because everybody's made themselves, and they've set themselves into a bubble. But I think that people have sort of chosen sides, and it's like, oh, you're one of them, and that's what it's become on this side of COVID. Is there's much more delineation between what people would ascribe to an us and them sort of thing. There's this side, there's that side, whatever. And you're either with us or against us. And I think that that's sort of the heels digging in, especially in the last 2 years of news, has rolled into our entertainment. Has rolled into we're feeling it with video games, the stuff that they started making 5, 10 years ago or whatever, like Grand Theft Auto 5 or Grand Theft Auto 6 or whatever. They've put so much energy into it that enough time has passed to where they times have changed. And so by the time Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, the stuff they put in there that was cool last summer is no longer cool, and it's going to threaten for the very first time the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Along those same lines, Star Wars, Lucasfilm, Disney, they've decided to make some changes, or at least Disney has announced that they're making some changes with regards to the DEI stuff and hiring and the press for almost an artificial kind of ingredient into the cakes and pies we were already eating. Let's add this, let's add that. No one needs bacon in a pie. You know what I'm saying? Like it didn't make sense what was going on. Then all of a sudden the theaters are not as full and Marvel movies are failing and, you know, Indiana Jones and those sorts of things. What do you make of the the switch? This, I mean, just a few months ago, Disney and Facebook and they were all about this lifestyle. They were all about these changes that they were making. They were telling us that it was it was going to be an improvement and um, basically what ended up happening is the largest demographic pulled out and said thank you but no for a large part, not lock stop. But then you have you have the weight of what they've been doing for the last 2 3 years sort of pulling them down. But they stuck to their guns all through basically the election, and then just recently, in the last, and I don't know if it, and this is my question, I don't know if it has to do with the way that Trump is just cutting shit left and right and sort of acting out of character for a U.S. president in his first month. Um, Disney, Facebook, all doing it about face, all saying that they're going to get rid of DEI and all the stuff and all those sorts of hiring practices and the push into movies. And I just saw this thing today that what was it? Was it Disney? I don't know. One of they dropped one animated feature, and now
Oh
they're
yeah,
starting
that was Disney. Yeah.
yeah, a Christian. So I don't I guess my question to you is what are your thoughts on where we find ourselves right now in the industry, where it sits? We have the remnants of what people have quite honestly said they don't care for, but it was in production and it's moving forward, and now we're finally, we'll see the ass end of those. But
Yeah.
like the new
Tail end.
yeah, but as we sort of switch into this new phase, what do you think? How do you think that's going to affect the Mando movie coming out? How do you think it's going to affect Star Wars projects or Lucasfilm projects moving forward?
I think there's still going to be a little bit of that stuff because I think companies have kind of trained themselves to do that. But I do feel like, we have to understand that movies and entertainment and music and all that stuff. It's I don't think that those things they don't exist to change our lives. The life-changing aspect of those things exist as a byproduct. But I think we have to understand that those things, companies exist to make money. The movies are a business. I always have this conversation with people on Twitter regarding movies. I always ask every so often, do you feel like movies are art or are they product? And there are artistic elements to making a movie and filmmaking, et cetera, et cetera. We know that, but I think for the most part, um, big movie studios create movies to sell a ticket, to make a buck. We have to understand that they're not making movies to change the world.
Right.
They're making movies to pad their bottom line. They've got investors, and that's the black and white of it. So if we take that into consideration, I think when what you're talking about is companies feeling like they needed to maybe shift and include another aspect of an audience that maybe they didn't before. But I think that's where they shot themselves in the foot. I think companies should really kind of stick to having their products, and I'm talking movies and shows and all that stuff, but having their products appeal more to a universal audience rather than nitpicking one specific aspect of the global market. Because I think that's
Or
like the surest.
or excluding a specific market.
Yeah. I think
In
exclusion in a specific market is definitely suicide for a company. But I think when it comes to George Lucas, when he created Star Wars, he didn't say, what, I'm just going to focus. I'm going to try to get XYZ audience. I think he was able to apply what he knew story wise and make it appeal to a universal audience. You could be blue, green, yellow, short hair, long hair, didn't matter. These films appeal to a universal audience because they touched you on a certain level that really appeal to you, no matter what color you were, no matter what sex you were, no matter what proclivity you handle, whatever. So getting back to the splintering of fandom, I think that was a byproduct of companies losing that focus. Obviously, we look at all the backgrounds of the YouTubers and content creators. I mean, look at your background. I'm sure everything that you have back there wasn't cheap. We work hard for our money, and we make selections as to where we spend our cash. We've got Star Wars logos behind us, and I think fans like us, we built the empire. But it wasn't the case of um, I didn't see myself represented up on screen, because nobody, when they're 7 years old, nobody's thinking about that.
no, no.
Absolutely. So we grow up with these franchises because they speak to us on a universal level. There are little things and little aspects of these films that do touch us on a specific level, because it's all very personal. What I love about Star Wars may be different from what you love about Star Wars, but I think George was able to kind of dish it all out and cast a wide net to bring in fans of all persuasions to the franchise. And I think unfortunately, companies lose that focus, lose that mo, and I do feel like they shot themselves in the foot by kind of, I don't know, going after a micro audience.
Yeah, I think I forget her name, but Ethan Hawke's daughter, is it Maya? Maya Hawke. She's on Stranger Things. She was just I just saw a video of her. She was talking about how she's getting ready to make a film, and there was talk about, I don't know if it had to do with her or whatever, but someone that she was talking about was getting ready to delete their Instagram, or was thinking about deleting their Instagram, and they're in the industry, and someone had to step in and tell them and say, "Hey, look, no, that's not how the industry's done anymore. It's designed around how many followers people
Right.
have." And so if you were to delete your Instagram, that means pull we would have to pull those followers from someplace else.
Sure.
And that aspect of it is just simply not what it's, I think what allowed Star Wars the grace excuse me, to become the empire that it did was the fact that it was made at a time where Lucas was able to tell the story in his way, and of course he fought, and we all know the story. But as far as the first story he wanted to tell, he fought to have that done. Nowadays, he couldn't have Mark Hamill. He couldn't have an unknown Carrie Fisher or Harrison Ford, who was a part, a small bit in his other movie. It would have been, which Leo DiCaprio of the time do you have, or which Angelina
Right.
Jolie? It would have been that if Fox had stepped in. You wouldn't have had some of the movies that we did have. Um, take the chance that they did. Now, of course, the studio, from my understanding, there was um, a lot more pressure on Empire and Jedi. Um, Different kind of pressure. Once Star Wars hit, yes, there was a lot of pressure because of what the hell kind of movie are we making, and it was kind of a running, not a running joke, but this is not going to work. He had friends
Sure.
tell him. I think Francis Ford Coppola told him that's not going to work. Um, and then boom, you just don't know. But you couldn't have. I couldn't imagine a movie like Star Wars having that sort of world-renowned, phenomenal. I think the closest thing in my lifetime, to tell you the truth, if it wasn't Star Wars, it was when Endgame. It was basically Endgame, and when they brought that back out several months later for another run in theaters, they brought Star Wars out through Empire Strikes Back, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't it come out just they had it in theaters, a small run or whatever, in
Sure.
before
And then
Empire came out?
in Yeah, and then in '92, when George started fiddling with the special effects, they re-released the special editions. I mean, it comes out every so often, in the theaters. But I think, you know, I'm always going to say that Star Wars belongs on the big screen. But you're right. It's funny because I asked just the other last week, is there any other movie franchise that has had an impact as much as Star Wars did in 1977 when it came out. From a social and cultural point of view, a technological point of view, I think Star Wars really broke the mold. You know, Even when we have new Star Wars. I think, the phenomenon right before The Force Awakens hit, it was palpable. I mean, you can feel it. The excitement was there because obviously after Return of the Jedi, or no, after Revenge of the Sith, we're like, is that it? And then all of a sudden, there's an announcement that, hey, we're getting the band back together, and people were losing their minds. It wasn't handled correctly, but still, the fact that people were losing their minds, and you had that first trailer from Comic-Con where Han says, Chewie, we're home, and you see the characters again. I mean, people were losing their shit.
That was ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. But we haven't seen that. I don't think we're going to see that with the Mando movie either. um it's I still think that Star Wars is relevant to a point, but I don't think it's as relevant to young kids as the original Star Wars and even the prequels were to that generation.
Do you think, based off of what we're talking about, even in what was it, 97? It must have been 97 when he was originally when he was starting the prequel trilogy. Um, Even then, even during the prequel trilogy, it was not the industry that it is today, and everything is so focus grouped and everything is so social media driven that I I can't help but think George saw this, and there was nothing he could have possibly done to have topped what he had already done. And I think that that aspect of it, of okay, my time has come and gone, and now I, because of social media and the direction of the industry and those sorts of things, I have to pass it off because I'm just not that guy anymore. I can't play in their sandbox the way they want me to, perhaps. But Force Awakens is pretty much exactly what we're talking about. We're focus
Mhm.
groups and how to play on Instagram and those sorts of things. And because when you pull it apart like everybody has, or a lot of people have, you see the similarities between A New Hope, and you see these. It's almost, if you go back, I mean, a running joke now would be that AI wrote it. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, because it was so
Derivative.
right. And uh, uh, what's the word? There was an equation to it, and it was like, oh, that's from this and that's from that, and
Right.
it was just, it was for beat almost. um Another Death Star and that kind of shit. And I don't know, it oh, they liked all these things, so we're just going to do another one of that. And
Yeah, and I feel like that was one of the studio's biggest mistakes. And obviously, when you're a company and you just fork over almost $4.5 billion, your investors are like, when are we going to get that money back? When are we going to get that return back? So I can understand from a corporate level, wanting to, recapture lightning in a bottle
sure.
to be able to satisfy, the investors up in the top floor. Um, obviously for what they are, the sequel trilogy, love it or hate it, I think, they made their money back. But I think, if they planned it a little better, if they cared about it a little more, if it wasn't treated as a business as much as it was, I think they probably would have doubled their money. um but you know are the investors happy? They sure the hell are.
Well, as far as,
um,
yeah, I mean, as far as the I think that the lightning in the bottle was the emotion, was the soul of the movie was just missing. It was just
yeah,
people going through the motions and bringing back familiarities. It wasn't so much about passing on the mantle to the next generation and inspiring a new. I mean, they said that, and yes, and that's the whole point of Ray, but it was, like you said, it was so mishandled with the different marketing, the different messages that were going out. There was no unified message. The only
right.
unified message was what do you call it, the trailers and what we saw from that. But once the reactions started coming out and people, and it was negative, the relationship between Disney, Lucasfilm, and its fans began to deteriorate. And now that Kathleen Kennedy, supposedly has stated that she's retiring at the end of the year or whatever, um, are you re-energized? I know, beware what you wish for. We have no idea who's going to replace her.
Right.
But at this moment, are you like, okay? Are you kind of, and I know, and I've watched you for years, and you're one of the voices that I love to listen to, because there is a level of positivity of, well, let's see if this one's good. Whereas the trend had been to just, no,
Just hate it.
that's
Right.
garbage out the gate, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
deal with it. But again, that's why I've enjoyed you guys for years, is because of that. And it and I but I will say that I have seen, especially over the course of the last couple years, the sort of change, because the gravity of the Disney Plus shows has been a huge albatross on the brand. And with Andor, like we started to talk about a little bit off air, with Andor, and Kathleen Kennedy leaving, what do you think the rest of this year going into 2026? I mean, I know we're still in we're in March or whatever, but as far as the rest of the year, what we know is coming out, do you think that this sort of energizes the brand? Do you think that there are people within Lucasfilm that are like, well, maybe I can, maybe this idea will work now? Or do you think that the direction will change quickly? Or I don't know. I'm just curious what
No,
your thoughts are on the new
yeah,
Lucasfilm.
I think we're still at the tail end of whatever realm we've lived through over the last few years with Kathleen Kennedy as leader of Lucasfilm. I think we're still at the tail end. You know, Andor as a TV series, has been in production and pre-production. I mean, it spans a few years even before now. They Tony Gilroy penned a nice deal that they wanted to make it a 3 seasons, but they cut it down to two. Um, and the Ahsoka season 2 is I don't know if they started shooting yet or if they're in the middle of shooting or all that stuff, but we're still waiting for season 2 of Ahsoka. We're getting obviously the Mando Grogu movie. So I think those are things that are still kind of tail end of this current regime, if you will.
Mm.
Um, I have not seen, and obviously when the leadership changes, whenever that is, I think that's when we'll start to see, new projects, new discussions, new creative people behind the scenes that will, hopefully usher Star Wars into the next 50 years. I know, a lot of people online, I keep hearing that Star Wars is dead every 3 months. Star Wars is dead. Oh no, Star Wars is dead. I don't think Star Wars is dead. I think it's it's a little bit in a coma from time to time, but I think you know I always ask this question too. If um if we never got any new Star Wars, would we be fine with Revenge of the Sith and then that's it? And then George says, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to go back to that universe. Or are we okay with the fact that he sold it to Disney and we have all this new stuff? And obviously, some of the really great projects, Star Wars projects that Disney has released, Rogue One being one of them. Andor for me is like top notch Star Wars, very well written. And I think the difference between I would say the difference between the best Star Wars on TV and the worst Star Wars on TV, there's a big gap there. Um, and it to me it's weird, and I understand there's different creatives that are in charge of writing these things, but there are a lot of people that can tell the difference between the quality of these shows for whatever reason. But it's interesting because just recently we dropped they dropped the second season trailer for Andor,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like night and day, brother. It's
Mm-hmm.
they spent some coin on this. It looks like a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people were complaining about the short running time of some of these Star Wars shows. Ahsoka had sometimes 32-minute episodes, and it's like, what the hell? Um, I know a lot of people were talking about in the first season of Andor, there were hoping that these 3 episode arcs were on their own, and I think they made the announcement that it's not going to be episode 1 episode a week. So I do feel it's like the proof is in the pudding. It does seem like Lucasfilm is kind of listening to the more level-headed fans that are discussing amongst themselves, how to improve or how to, I don't know, I don't want to say fix because that implies that it's completely broken, but you know, th- they are kind of listening to some of the fans. Some of the fans said, it'd be great to kind of have, the best way to watch Andor is in 3 episode or 4 episode chunks because the story arcs are complete, and that's what we're getting in season 2. We're going to be getting, almost like mini movie events for the 4 weeks that the series runs, and I'm all here for that.
It does the format that they have going on. It does feel as though there some creative license. Maybe there was a relenting of sorts. I don't know exactly, but the first season of Andor is a departure from all the other shows. Quite simply, the what little bit I did see of Ahsoka, it feels more like it's in the Force Awakens vein, and telling that story. But as far as Andor goes, I do like the fact that it hits up to Rogue One and A New Hope, and that's where the base fandom started from or whatever. But with
Sure.
Rogue One, the expansion is like, okay, that's that's the focus of Star Wars, and then you have these other shows, but the to take the Skywalker to take the Skywalker saga and to make it just nothing. No more or less important than just Ray the scavenger. Um, I think it was one of the biggest missteps. If she was not related, because for 2 years, all we did was talk about who is she related to.
Right.
Is it Kenobi? Is it, is she a Skywalker? Is she a Palpatine? That was the big thing too.
Right.
As it turns out. But what what future projects, like right now Andor, the format, the three every week they're going to have, basically it's only going to be 4 weeks long, and they're going to have, or 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Four
Yeah.
4 weeks with 3 episodes. That's right. Um but it's going to hit, from what I understand, because I've been keying in on it. It's going to hit some very major Star Wars events. Some, if I'm not mistaken, have been alluded to in old traditional Lucas Star Wars, as well as there are some. I think there's a massacre that occurs in one of the books, or is alluded to in the comics or something.
Right, the Gorman massacre, and I can't remember if it's expanded universe or but it is mentioned. I think the Gormans were mentioned in season one of Andor, and
Mm,
there's you know the Empire. And this is one of the things that I love about this show is that I'm going to backtrack a little bit because you had said something regarding the up and down quality of some of the shows. Andor obviously is Tony Gilroy is a seasoned veteran. He's a filmmaker and stuff like that. I mean, Ahsoka was helmed by Dave Filoni, who, everybody was saying that Dave Filoni was the Star Wars savior. I don't think he's quite up there yet. I think he still lacks experience in directing live action. He's been doing, animation for a really, really long time. And obviously, he started that with George Lucas himself before they sold. But there are aspects of his storytelling that fit perfectly for that format, the animation format, and you can tell that he has applied that to the Ahsoka series, which he has total control of that. But it sometimes it falls flat on live action, because for whatever reason, I think there is a subtle difference between directing actors behind a booth and a microphone versus the setup and the control that you have on a set with live action actors and stuff like that. So there is a difference. I think like I said, Gilroy is a seasoned veteran when it comes to filmmaking, and it's funny because the best Star Wars have been done by non-Star Wars fans. Irving Kershner, who directed The Empire Strikes Back, he's
right.
not into science fiction. He was, uh, an actor's director. He was, you know, interested in the relationship between the characters. So I think it's kind of ironic when people say, you just don't understand Star Wars. Get somebody that understands Star Wars to direct a Star Wars. And sometimes, you mentioned it earlier, be careful what you wish for, but sometimes that might not be the medicine that's needed. um when it comes to the differences between the people behind the scenes, I think for a while, and obviously I think it did start with the sequel trilogy. I think Kathleen Kennedy started to pick, director of the month or flavor of the month. JJ had just come off of a successful Star Trek directing, and she courted him to come over to the other side of the aisle to direct a Star Wars and write a Star Wars. Um, and it just kind of started there. I don't think, Star Wars is one of those franchises that you can't bring in outside people to put their stamp on Star Wars. I am dreading, if it does happen, I am dreading the Tiki Waititi Star
Mm,
Wars.
Yeah.
He's such a quirky director, and I think if you're bringing in a director to put their style onto the franchise, it's going to fail.
Hmm.
I think people have to understand that Star Wars is a specific sandbox, and you have to kind of mold yourself around that. You have to remember, what George was doing, and then play in that sandbox. It can't be the other way around, because I think and I'm not saying that Star Wars doesn't have room to grow, because obviously, if we want Star Wars to survive into the next 50 years, somewhere in there, there's got to be some sort of flex, Bob and weave. But it's got to be done the right way. It's got to be done delicately, because it is, it's a franchise that is unique unto itself, even in films and movies.
Well,
Um,
I think the maybe the consternation comes from the fact that perhaps this newer generation is so used to superhero movies, and each superhero having their own sort of flavor, and then they come together for a big movie at the end. I
yeah.
it that mindset of, well, why can't you just have a Princess Leia movie? Why can't you just have an Ewok movie? Why couldn't you just? And so it's this saturate oversaturation. Whereas, like we were talking about before, we went from 1983 to, what was it, 1999, and there was
Mhm.
nothing,
Right.
and except books and comics and those sorts of things, and the Christmas the Christmas specials.
Right.
So it are we blessed to have too much? I don't. There is part of the argument that is ridiculous. I have the same argument. But I don't think that there's a time I would much rather be in, even if I don't necessarily like everything that's coming out,
Oh, that's interesting.
because there's so much coming out. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I don't need to like that. I can like something else, and that's fine. And I think Andor is like that. I was telling you earlier. I hadn't had Disney Plus in a while, and then my daughter found a loophole, so she's paying for it now. Anyways, and so I'm catching up on Andor over the weekend or whatever, and it there is an aspect of that show. I knew my subscription was ending as I was starting the show, so I wasn't really vested in it. But in this aspect of going through a rewatch, it is interesting, how different this world of Star Wars feels than even Mando. Where
Yeah.
Mando was almost live action for kids, and this is much more of a Star Wars TV show for adults. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at it. The production is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know how much it costs, but just
Well,
looking
I
at it, it
was
it looks
Forbes
so beautiful.
magazine. Yeah, Forbes magazine said that the two series cost almost $700 million.
So both seasons.
Yeah.
That's that's
Yeah.
that's a lot. That
Yeah.
is for 24 episodes.
Right. 12. Yeah, 12 and 12.
24 episodes. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was a lot of the reason why George didn't go into Star Wars, didn't put Star Wars on TV back in the day, because it was going to be way too expensive for what he
Well,
needed to
yeah,
do.
and ILM was rehearsing and practicing and trying to get that cost down. The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles was on TV, but that was ILM trying to figure out how can we do, cinema style, stories on the small screen without spending the big screen budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is another aspect of George Lucas and ILM that I really appreciate. Pushing the envelope of technology. I'm a technology nerd. I love cameras. I love technology. I love all that stuff. So the fact that they were able to do that through the creation of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, to me, I think it's is great. I just watched a show just recently, and I think it holds up pretty well. I think Indiana Jones is another one of those Lucasfilm products that I really enjoy and I really love. Um, but I think I heard somebody say that at least the first season of The Mandalorian was definitely something that George would have done so, in the 90s if he had the ability to do so. And I think they're not far off, because I think that's what he was trying to do. And obviously, Dave Filoni still having, a connection with George Lucas. I think Dave still has George's number on speed dial. He's able to
I'm
kind of
sure.
come on the set from time to time. He was on the set for Solo with Ron Howard. So he's kind of still around, but yeah, I think I think Star Wars on the small screen, for me, is not what it was all cracked up to be. I think, and here's the funny thing: you talk about oversaturation with Star Wars, and to a certain degree, Marvel Comics and all the TV shows that Marvel has out. I hear the term superhero fatigue or Star Wars fatigue, but I don't think it's a fatigue of too much of one thing. I think it's just a fatigue of mediocrity. I
Right.
think when it comes to, nobody would be having these types of conversations if every Star Wars show was good, or great or excellent. I think
Right.
a lot of the complaints come from, this story doesn't make sense. These characters don't live up to their expectations. Their actions don't make sense. The writing is crap. All that stuff. So I think if those things would kind of, the visuals are there. Star Wars is not Star Wars without the visuals, and we understand that. Um, but I think if some of the other things that allow a production to be elevated to near greatness, if all those things were tweaked, the writing and the character development, the care from people behind the scenes, and people up in the upper echelon of management. If those things were raised a little, I think Star Wars would be in a different place than what it is now.
Do you think the fact that Disney's involved has scared a lot of creators away from Star Wars?
Yes, and I've heard other directors say, I would love to direct a Star Wars, but I can't because Disney controls too much of the narrative behind the scenes. But it's interesting because Tony Gilroy is getting, full creative control, and with a little oversight, from some of the folks at Lucasfilm. But I do find it interesting that, out of all the projects, Tony Gilroy, the seasoned professional, as I call him, is getting free reign and is allowed to do what he does best, and that is to write a great story, direct some great actors, and have a show that has been, critically acclaimed, um, by critics and fans alike, especially older fans, like you mentioned. But it is, like I said, it is interesting, and I don't know what the deal is with some of the directors that may, require maybe a hand holding from Lucasfilm, or I don't know if they require it, but maybe Lucasfilm notices that, because obviously if you tell a Tony Gilroy, how to direct a scene, there's going to be some pushback because Tony
Right.
Gilroy knows how to direct a scene. So I don't know, maybe it is a little lackluster in the leadership of Lucasfilm, and obviously that falls on Kathleen Kennedy to be able to, um, you know, rein in, or at least make the right decisions as to, who stewards this next story in a Star Wars.
Do you think that Tony's involvement was sort of intentional in the sense that there are no there are no seasoned veterans at that level of create? I mean, we have John Favreau, but as far as his involvement in other things, it doesn't appear like Dave Filoni or whatever that Favreau is involved in anything other than Mando.
Right.
And even then, yeah, I think it's just Mando that he's involved with. So the whole idea that perhaps John Favreau would replace Kathleen Kennedy, I'm not entirely sure about, but he's not busy. I mean, he's just doing the Mando thing. Is he directing the Mando movie?
No, I think Filoni's directing. Favreau is executive producing. I don't, Kathleen Kennedy's position is more of a, administrator. I think
Sure.
Favreau likes to get his hands dirty in filmmaking. I don't think he would want it. I don't think anybody that is in the creative field that is actually out there directing and setting up cameras and working with actors. I don't think any of those type of people would want to be in Kathleen Kennedy's shoes, because it's like I said, I think it's more of an administrative position. Um, so who knows? I just see people were saying, Dave Filoni should take this place, but I just, again, he really doesn't have that type of experience.
No, and then of course there's old Pablo Hildago and all that old fan
Yeah,
crew.
yeah, but there are a couple of names. I can't remember what Michelle Rejwan is doing nowadays. I think she's still behind the scenes at Lucasfilm. Carrie Beck is another
Hmm.
person that might be the next Padawan, to the Kathleen Kennedy. She's still at Lucasfilm doing, live action development, so there might be a little bit of synergy there. Um, but who knows? I definitely know that George Lucas doesn't want it back. He's retired here in Chicago, and he's busy living his life,
Well, yeah,
and well
no,
deserved.
yeah. I mean, geez, I wouldn't want to get back into the mess of trying to untangle all of this. That's for
Yeah.
damn sure. Which is interesting because, which segues into another story I wanted to talk about was the dealing with Disney as well. Marvel's Marvel bringing back Daredevil. Um, what what have you seen the first couple
Yeah.
episodes?
Yeah.
What were your initial impressions? Netflix versus Disney Plus.
Well, before watching the first two episodes, obviously I was afraid that Daredevil was going to be Disneyfied. I think it's one of those things that a lot of people worry about when the platforms change, especially after how gritty and how um, you know bloody that the Netflix
Violent.
series was, and
Yeah.
violence. Yeah, so we're only two episodes in to the new Born Again Daredevil series, so we'll see what happens. I think there should be plenty of people somewhere that are kind of making sure that we don't lose the aspect of the character that people loved from not only the comic books but the Netflix series. They're already doing some of the technical things that the Netflix series was doing, so there is kind of a little bit of a remix there. Those long, single shot fights between characters in a hallway. You saw some of that in the two episodes. Um, but a lot of people gave Mark Hamill flack for voicing his opinion about how his character was handled in that middle film that I don't like to mention. But there are times when you have to realize that if a actor portrays a certain character for as long as Mark Hamill did, then he should have some sort of credit to be able to say something about the character that he portrays. And I
Right.
think the Charlie Cox is one of them. I mean, he's played Daredevil for a long time, and I think hopefully he's kind of not sidelined by the showrunners. And hopefully he'll be able to say, I just read this and I don't think this is right. Maybe we can change it to this. Maybe Daredevil or Matt Murdock would say this or do that. So I'm hoping that there are checks and balances between the two platforms that will allow Disney's Daredevil venture to thrive. Because I think obviously people are watching, and there are people that are able to compare apples to apples to see just how appley they are.
Well, yeah, and the different flavors and stuff that it's just a completely different tone when you say that that a show is going to be on Disney Plus. There's an expectation. I think it's
Sure.
weird showing up to like R-rated movies or like right there on your homepage and those sorts of things on Disney Plus now, but to have shows like Daredevil, which has, like we were saying before, it has its own flavor that can play well in a bigger movie. But when you're doing a Daredevil movie or a Daredevil show, it's Hell's Kitchen. It's raining. It's shitty. It's downtrodden. It's violent. The Punisher, Luke Cage, all of that era of comics is the grittiness, and then you have, you come out on the other side with like a Deadpool, which is completely, off tilt. But the good old days of the clean cut superhero, or maybe a conflicted Batman, from a long time, but it was not nearly the psychological goat screw it is today to write a character that um, can not only pull from its source material but tell a new story in a way that captivates both old fans and brings in new fans. I mean, we're asking them to dance on water every single time they make a movie, but they act as though they're making gold every time they produce a movie. So there's this give and take in Hollywood, and do you think the do you think people's what's the word I'm looking for, apprehensions about Born Again, do you think that those were valid, or do you think that the show's pretty much doing pretty good on its own?
Oh, I think they were definitely valid. I think, I remember thinking myself, like, how are they going to how is Disney going to bring in a character like the Punisher? You can't wrap your head around that, because the Punisher is the type of character that he is. And I can't imagine, seeing the skull on his chest and all of a sudden the Disney logo. It's kind of a weird mind fuck.
Mm-hmm. It
Um,
is.
but again, I think two episodes in, I liked what I saw. I know there were some complaints about his character, specifically, the religious nature of his character. And again, we're only two episodes in. If you had that argument after the series concluded and we saw no evidence of that aspect of his character, then I'll give you some credit. But calm down, ladies. We're only two episodes in.
Because it does play basically a fundamental role into like the background of his character. It's sort of
Yeah,
the moral fiber that it's his Alfred basically to Batman,
sure.
his sort of moral compass. And so it is interesting that people have noticed that. But yeah, again, two episodes in, I got to get on that. I've got a long, busy weekend ahead of me. I got so
And
many
of
things.
course, with a show called Born Again, you would think that that he is conflicted. He's conflicted within himself. He's into self reflection. Um, you know, Obviously he's going to be born again. So maybe he's struggling. Maybe he's But again, two episodes in, we'll see what happens the next couple of weeks.
And apparently they're going to be ignoring the whole Lady Hulk, She Hulk affair or whatever have you that occurred.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I mean they mentioned some stuff from what happened previous, especially to Fisk.
Hmm.
But you can't include everything.
No.
It's good. That's fine. That's fine.
So there's this. How long in between the two seasons? How long between the last time we saw Daredevil and Disney? Did they make a?
I don't know if they made a distinction, but it couldn't have been that long. I know that the three characters opened up their own law firm. I think before I can't even remember if they had their own law firm, but they the scene starts out with them together, at the end of their day, locking up, so it can't be that long.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting because that's interesting because the time gap. It sounds as though he's walked away. He's walked away from being
Yeah.
Daredevil, and He's getting pulled back in.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, and I forgot you have not seen it yet, but
No.
yeah, there is evidence to suggest that he's old man Luke on Octo.
Okay. All right. That's trying to step around that gently, but yeah. Um, that's interesting. Yeah, no, it will be interesting to see how they handle that because the Catholicism was. I mean, is it important that a Daredevil character have that? And I think that particular character in and of itself would it be important for a Spider-Man to show him going to church? Well, it's not part of his character, so
Right,
it would
right.
just be an addendum almost to
Sure.
whatever you were already telling.
But you're
Um,
right. I mean, Daredevil, his his faith is really embedded in his character. I mean, it's similar to Nightcrawler. I mean,
you
being a character
right,
that looks like a devil, be so devout, it's kind of an interesting flex. So if they never did that to Nightcrawler, yeah, there would be a problem because you're skipping a very fundamental aspect of a certain character, especially a character that's been around for so long. Besides just the Netflix movies, he's been in
right,
comic books forever.
of course. And there was either in comics or in the cartoons they did Wolverine became, I think it was the '90s cartoon. Wolverine goes through a whole transformation and becomes a Christian, and through the different cartoon series and stuff. So it's interesting how full circle we've come
Sure.
to where
Yeah.
the we're now making a reboot. I guess they made a reboot of the '90s cartoon, but it's modern
Hmm.
and it's not. It doesn't have the same soul as the old one, and yeah, it's. I don't know. The creativeness of the level of effort almost, and I know a lot of money's being spent, and I'm not saying these people aren't working hard. I'm just not. But I don't know if it's like, oh, that's fine enough, or oh, that's good enough. I don't know what the level of give a shit is in Hollywood, but it's not rampant like it had been in previous generations. The Hollywood now, it's almost just like we're in one of these, kind of like how it was in the '80s, where it's just like we just need a movie, boom, we just need a TV show, boop, and then if it doesn't do well, whatever, we got a mid-season replacement, and we'll just throw that in there. It was throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick, and then you start to have some traction with especially with TV shows and stuff, sitcoms and those sorts of things, and then like a template kind of emerges, and then there's a bunch of those. We had '90s films and your Speed and Usual Suspects and Seven, and you had this sort of coming out of the '80s, which was very campy and very bright and very, oh my goodness. And then the '80s, or the '90s rather, was just like we're all gonna die and it sucks and
Hmm.
shitty. And but the thing is that there was a generation that was speaking that to us that was 20 years older than us. And I think what's happening now is the generation that's tuning in to Star Wars, they've grown up with it, with this, or Star Wars, Marvel, DC, they've grown up with this mentality that is for kids. And
And that's always been there. I mean, Paul, the pulp fiction comic books, superheroes, all that stuff. I mean,
right.
Stan Lee created a fake name to write the greatest American novel, and for him, it was writing comic books. He didn't want to be associated. Well, he did. It's not that he didn't want to be associated with, but he wanted to be able to write a novel, but then also be able to pay the bills by writing comic books.
Hmm.
So his wife said, "Go and do what you want to do," and Stan Lee became Stan Lee and wrote, started creating the comic books.
Well, on that vein, when you do, if you were to take the general concept of if you were to just to say I'm going to take this superhero and make it into the superhero comic book and make it into a movie, um, the first thoughts that go in your head, you're going to have merchandising, you're going to try to keep it PG-13. There's certain parameters that go into a movie like that. very rarely are they thought of as G or PG. Like that's not even considered. Like it literally has to fit within the PG-13 realm. Do you think taking if in the vein of comic books, not Star Wars but comic books, because I have my own opinion of Star Wars, but as far as Pulp Fiction and comic books and those sorts of things, there is an argument to be made that it's not for children, but it is for young adults and people who can understand larger concepts, maybe late elementary school or junior high, that sort of thing. Not 5, 6, 7 year olds or
Mhm.
that there is an aspect of appreciation that they can have, but some of the concepts are too weighty. How does that change in 2025 when you have to inject who's dating who and who thinks they're what gender and all of this, when you start compounding on top of an already complex story that sort of resonates, when you pull that out and you're left with just what fans want, what do you think as far as Marvel and DC? Well, DC I don't really pay attention to, but as far as Marvel and Star Wars goes, as Disney, wow, publicly they're saying they're pulling all these little widgets back of the different. I don't know how it's going to affect the Oscars. We just had the Oscars apparently. I didn't even know, but they had all the parameters for Best Picture and stuff that they had put out in recent years. It's got to have a certain amount of this, that, and the other thing in order to qualify to be Best Picture, or to be nominated, anyways. As fans and consumers, not only in film and movies or whatever, but across the board, are fatiguing of these different experimentations. Do you think that there is a point where there can be a resurgence of Marvel, there can be a resurgence of Star Wars? DC kind of reinvents itself or whatever, but it doesn't. It DC is kind of secondary in the conversation as far as I'm concerned, because Marvel did so much over this last 20 years that they have to be included on the same level, I think, with a Star Wars of a resounding sort of, just in volume in and of itself. Where would you like? I think I was starting one question, I veered off to another, which is fine. It's my show. um,
Exactly. Exactly.
what for you would be what are you looking for in Star Wars moving forward that you haven't gotten from Disney Star Wars yet?
The only product, talking about Disney Star Wars, the only product that I am completely satisfied with as far as what I get out of, I guess there's different levels and different degrees of it, because if we want to go back, season one of Mandalorian was great. It was something new. It was I don't want to say it was fresh, but it was a fresh telling of new characters in a timeline that we were very familiar with. And I guess I'll encompass just all of Mandalorian. Then you get to a show like Ahsoka, which is very familiar, because if you watched the animated shows, you know these characters, so there's a familiarity there. There's a kind of a satisfaction, an itch that is satisfied. You get to a show like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, where everybody tuned in to see the further storytelling of Anakin and Anakin and Obi-Wan. They threw in this extra character that nobody knew or nobody cared about, Riva, which I think was the bad point of the show. Um, and then getting into Acolyte, I think one of the things that I was excited, both Brad and I, was especially for the Acolyte, was that it was going to be darker in nature. I always say, yeah, I like my Star Wars dark and moody. I like my superheroes dark and moody. And we were really looking forward to seeing, a Star Wars that kind of had a darker tone. Um, Unfortunately, the Acolyte did what it did, and it wasn't as satisfactory um, in our book of tricks as we thought it would be. Zooming ahead, I think after the Acolyte, we got Skeleton Crew, and yes, it was geared to a younger audience. But Brad and I were pleasantly surprised. We really, really enjoyed the series. It had
Mm.
a nature of fun and freshness to it. I think both shows, the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, had a group of young actors. But I think the actors in the Skeleton Crew did better than the actors in the Acolyte because the scripts were better. I
Mm.
think the story was better crafted, and they did phenomenal. I think not unlike the Willow series, where I really liked the actors that were in the Willow series. It's just that the script and the story was ass. You can only do a certain amount of massaging to a script before you realize it's just we really need a rewrite or two. So I feel like that was the Acolyte's problem in a nutshell. Somebody did a first draft and said, hey, let's film this. um where Skeleton Crew was I think it was a better written show. But as far as satisfaction when it comes to new Star Wars, obviously, I will praise Rogue One till I'm blue in the face. Andor, obviously, like I mentioned, is top notch, drama and Star Wars. It just happened to be a Star Wars, so I'm really looking forward to Andor season 2, obviously. But I think when it comes to curbing your expectations, and I know a lot of fans kind of poo poo on the fact that a lot of us expect certain things, but I don't know a fan that doesn't expect certain things. You go into a Cadillac dealership, you're not going to buy a Yugo. It's
No.
you expect something when you are a fan of something that you've been a fan of for basically all your life. So this argument of don't set your expectations too high is ridiculous. We did a show, Brad and I did a show a while ago. Do we watch Star Wars now with lower expectations? And I'm like, heck no. We're always going to
No.
love the franchise, and we always have high hopes for whatever they slap a Star Wars on. We'll talk about it, we'll tell you why we didn't like it, and we can have an exchange in a civil manner. But I think it's we expect certain things from something that we know,
Hmm.
and if we don't get it, obviously we're gonna be a little upset. But it's not like I wanted this to happen and it sucks because it didn't happen. It's just we talk about certain aspects of story and acting and the overall experience of watching a certain show. um, and I think that's when things get a little sticky, because I think you and I have had this discussion off the air. When you've got a group of fans that are the all Star Wars is good type of fans.
Hmm.
I don't know how the I don't want to talk down about any particular group of people, but I don't know how the rest of their lives are if they feel like they love everything, because
Right.
nobody does that. Nobody does that in a healthy way. I even asked a follower, do you have a favorite hat? And he says, no, I love all my hats. I'm like, you can't love all your hats. You have to have one hat that is favorite of yours.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
It's yeah.
So,
Yeah. I don't know.
I always look forward to new Star Wars. I will watch it, I will absorb it, and I will evaluate it based on my criteria. It doesn't mean that you have to evaluate it
Right.
under the same criteria. There are people that love the Acolyte, all three of them, but it's it is what it is.
Yeah, I think I would like to. I still have hope. I think after the movie that shall not be named in 2017, I think the initial response was accurate. I think, although harsh, was that this is not for us. And if this is not for us, well, then we're just not going to participate. But then to have the industry then yell at us for not participating, and it just was
Yeah.
this back and forth of well, apparently you didn't make it for us, or what the hell is this, and actual because I don't remember Force Awakens. I there were detractors. There were people that were like Disney Star Wars is just going to suck. So this was even before Force Awakens came out. It's just like Disney's involved, it's going to suck. So that was already baked in. But as far as the people who went in kind of blank slate, wanted to be thrilled, wanted to see it for the first time, wanted to have that experience in the theaters and enjoyed it. I think they spent the better part of the next 2 years scrutinizing and wanting and wishing and hoping and kind of having expectations. Well, I wonder if that's what this means. And I don't think a lot of it was unrealistic. I think that the vast majority of it followed a logical sort of train of thought. But I do think that having the rug pulled out, and then not only having the rug pulled out where it was like, holy shit, this was not what we were expecting. Because I remember vaguely, I was young, but I remember vaguely when Empire Strikes Back came out where people were like, what is this? Like they saw Star Wars, they saw A New Hope or Star Wars, and they had an idea in their mind what a sequel would be like. And this was not that. And I think that the arrogance and, quite frankly, retardation of Ryan Johnson to think, and I have no idea how his name was even in a hat for Star Wars to begin with, um, but to have him in seclusion, damn near, or at least outside of JJ's purview, writing the sequel to JJ's movie simultaneously, concurrently, with very little crossover. It was like almost as though Ryan Johnson didn't want to know anything about Force Awakens. If he had a question, he'll ask, but that was about it. He was writing a completely different story.
And you can tell.
Right. And to
I mean,
bring,
you can put the Force Awakens together with the Rise of Skywalker and not miss a beat if you don't have that middle film.
right. It, the play, yes. And that would be my preferred way to probably watch that because that is a cleaner representation. I mean, you do skip, there is a skip, but there's nothing to, there, you don't miss enough of the key plot points to where it makes any difference.
Right.
So, what was the point of the Last Jedi? And that's basically what it comes down to is people are asking themselves, okay, with this big stinker still hanging out there, 8 years later, what's the point of Ahsoka? What's the point of Andor? Why do we need this? Where are we going with this? What story is being told that I need to tune in? Because of saturation and those sorts of things, but it has gotten to a point where there's been such a run of mediocrity that it's a shame, but it's almost as though like the normal crowd of TV watching moviegoers, they're just not willing to give the next Star Wars or Marvel show a chance anymore because the last five, six, or however many have just been meh, or they haven't finished them, or maybe they're not even coming back. They're just like how I was for a couple years. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna watch them. Um,
And it's funny because obviously, after the Last Jedi, I've got friends. Obviously, you hear of people just saying, after that, I'm no longer a Star Wars fan, and I feel bad because, being a Star Wars fan all my life, I always say on the podcast, if you cut me, I bleed Star Wars, but I don't. I decide. I chose not to give the Last Jedi that kind of power that it would boot me out of of a fandom that I've been a part of for since I was 7 years old.
mhm.
Ryan Johnson can cry all he wants, but I'm not giving him that ability, that power, that satisfaction of having that film affect me so much that
Right.
that I leave the fandom.
Right. It was an interesting time. But that's ultimately that I think has been, I think, the driving factor, and who I've stayed in contact with is that sort of constant of, it's not going to have that much power over my life. We're simply going to move on. We'll talk about it. It's going to be a running joke and those sorts of things. But to to still to still be that mad 8 years
Right.
later, it there are things like, to your point, if I don't want to engage in it, after Endor, what was it? There were several shows, Ahsoka and a couple other ones that came out that I didn't see. I've seen bits of, but I haven't seen the show or whatever because I didn't have Disney Plus. But that was how I handled it. Was just, yeah, you know what? I don't need to be involved. And if it is something that big of a deal, maybe I'll get the Blu-ray or whatever. It that kind of became my level of engagement without the anger, without the vitriol,
Hmm.
without the need to or feel like I need to go out and just prove to people how wrong their opinions are about a
Right.
fucking movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
It
Yeah.
just, it's like, okay, well, we're 8 years later. What do we, are we, there are other things to talk about, And
Sure.
so,
Yeah.
um, I do like the evolution of Star Wars. I do like the idea of Marvel. I think they got kind of railroaded in the middle there of once Endgame was over, I think it it appears to me, not being a comic book guy, that they're back to just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. That they had an idea. COVID really threw a monkey wrench into everything Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, everything. Both movies, TV shows. It just was a huge mess. But coming, it's 2025, and we should be 3 years removed from all of that, and yet it still feels like movies and television shows are being hampered by something. And I think that we need to we need to get back. I like the voices. I like the idea that people are gravitating away, my fucking chair, sorry. Gravitating away from the negative aspect and sort of just holding on to and focusing on what they've enjoyed about certain things. I didn't like this, whatever. Talking more, I think, more of an adult nature, and
Mm.
recognizing that not everything's meant for everybody. And, just because you've been a fan for 40 years doesn't mean that everything that comes out is going to be your cup of tea. Like, who
Sure.
watches the Christmas special and those sorts of things.
Mm.
But, all right, Mr. Rowe, Mr. Gentleman, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through real quickly, briefly. We have UFO Chronicles following on TikTok. We're gonna go ahead and give shouts out both. Let's see, that was not from today, so we're not do that. Over here on YouTube, we have Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. Thank you, Ro. Charles Westcott, welcome to it. We got Nicole. She was in here. Everybody's just having cakes and pies.
Cakes and pies. Good
Cakes and
stuff. Good
pies,
stuff.
baby.
Yep.
Well, sir, it is, as always, it has been a pleasure. I love catching up with you and getting all the rundown, getting the temperature of the hardcore Star Wars geekdom. I dig it. I honestly do. And thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
I was looking forward to it, and it's always it's. I was gonna say it's always sunny on Scarif, and that's the scuttlebutt. But it's always great to catch up. It's always fantastic to talk without yelling at the wall. Somebody that is level headed when it comes to their fandom. Um, I see backyard TARDIS in the chat as well. He's
Just jumped
there
in.
lurking, but I know he's battling some stuff at home. Hope
Mm.
everyone gets healthy back there. But yeah, absolutely. I think I love talking about this stuff. I know my wife makes fun of me and says, "You're still talking about that one movie." Like, yeah, 50, almost 50 years later, we still got stuff to talk about.
Wives, dude, wives. Jeez. I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wives,
they should
daughters. Yeah, it's fun.
they should get a hobby.
Yeah, no shit. Quit jumping on me for having one. Damn it. you know. But all
But
right,
it's
Mr.
it's always fun, man. It's always fun. Thank you for the invite.
Yes.
Like I said, I was looking forward to, chatting. A lot of times I don't get to chat certain aspects of the fandom on my show with other things because we kind of like to keep it light and stuff like that. We'll get deep, but it's nice to really get in the weeds about things with you here, and wish you all the best.
Well, I appreciate it. We certainly have to do this again. There's a lot of stuff coming up, of course, summer and all that stuff. We just gotta
Yeah.
keep up and keep in touch. Well, thanks again, my friend. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. I think we're pretty much gonna end it. Thank you, everybody, for
Excellent.
hanging out on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, X, TikTok. I'm forgetting one. Yeah, I'm not streaming to Rumble because it wouldn't work. I'm 97 Bravo. That is Ro from the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. You guys are awesome. And as always, be cool, and we will catch you next time. Latest.